I honestly thought I'd suffer hemochromatosis for the rest of my life. I believed there was no way out of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. A simple two-step process changed everything. I've not had a single HTC symptom for 3 years. I used to suffer from hemochromatosis. It was a nasty condition and, to be honest, my memories of it are all bad. Until a few years ago, hemochromatosis, or HCT, was something that you have to manage over the rest of your life, with regular, never-ending hospital trips and invasive, unpleasant treatments. Yet after years of battling HCT, I'm past all that now. I've been clear for a little over 3 years. I've not been back to the hospital at all in that time except for an annual checkup, and to make sure my iron levels are, indeed, well within safe ranges. Which they always are. I was recently reminded of my journey out of the HCT nightmare as I watched a documentary about gene therapy. It's fascinating stuff. Gene therapy is a huge deal. Some gene therapies are already achieving jaw-dropping results for people with previously untreatable illnesses. The documentary grabbed my attention because when I was suffering HCT, I'd used a natural form of gene therapy to get well. Gene therapy is based on the simple fact that faulty genes can cause us illnesses, but they don't necessarily have to. All too often, it is lifestyle factors, the things we do day to day, that determines whether a particular gene switches on to create actual illness. And if it does, then it can be repaired and the illnesses it causes can be undone. The scientific study of how to undo genetic illnesses, like HCT, is called epigenetics. And it's thanks to epigenetics that I don't have HCT anymore. We can change the way our genes affect our health. Epigenetics is a multi-billion-dollar area of research, studied throughout the world and funded by health institutions, universities and by governments. It shows us that we can directly affect a gene's damaging behavior so that it no longer hurts us. The scientific end to hemochromatosis. Now, you already know more about epigenetics than you think. In fact, if you currently suffer from HCT, you're a perfect example of epigenetics at work. You possibly know that to have HCT you need an HCT gene from your mom and another from your dad. But, as your doctor will have explained, lots of people have both these genes. Yet lots of them don't get HCT. How come? Epigenetics looks for this missing link in diseases like HCT. It asks the question, what is it that makes the HCT gene devastate some lives, yet be completely harmless to others? The answer to that question has been found. It's because certain genes act one way on some people, and another way on other people. Putting this in medical jargon, the gene expresses one way with Bob, for example, and a completely different way with Mary. How a gene expresses, that is, how the gene affects you, goes on to determine whether you get ill or not. So identical twins can have identical genes, yet different genetic illnesses. And this is because although the genes themselves are the same, the way they express for each twin can be very different. And this is the key. If you have hemochromatosis, it's not just because of the genes you inherited from your parents. Something else, some missing link, was making those genes express in a way that creates HCT in your body. The missing link is now known and it shows us a path out of the HCT nightmare. And that's the path I took back into full and vibrant health. HCT for life is no longer inevitable. Now that scientists know what causes HCT, we finally have the power to directly influence those causes. And that's exactly what I learned to do. I made barely noticeable but very powerful alterations to some specific things I did, things that my HCT gene was strongly affected by, and then watched my iron readings start to tumble. The details of epigenetics are very complex. But for me as a sufferer of HCT, the way of using this powerful discipline was very straightforward. And it changed my life forever. I'm not that clever. So, a bit of a disclaimer here. I'm not some scientific whiz kid who worked this out by myself. I stumbled onto this information by accident. I read about a treatment for HCT on an old online health forum some years ago. Some ex-HCT sufferers were describing how they had followed a program created by a science-based natural health practitioner called Shelley Manning. They'd made some simple, but specific, changes to their diets, which had made profound changes to how their HCT behaved. First, excess iron started draining from their blood and tissues. They experienced gradually falling iron levels month after month, without a single medical treatment from their hospital. Second, they described how the program also tackled the actual cause of their HCT, the source of their illness. It didn't just mop up years of excess iron. It got rid of the very reason for all this to be happening in the first place. So that none of it happened anymore. They said the program they followed stopped the absorption of excess iron. They hadn't just tinkered with HCT symptoms. They'd hit the condition hard at its genetic cause. They'd beaten HCT. If you're interested, please click on the link below the video to watch the full content. I'll be brutally honest here, I didn't believe a word of it. I'm not at all into alternative health stuff. Rightly or wrongly, as it turned out, I trust doctors in everything. Which might make you wonder why I was even looking at alternative therapies for my HCT in the first place. Why was I even considering this stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. It was because the standard therapies I had been undergoing were starting to hurt. I'd been seeing a phlebotomist for several months, initially giving blood twice a week. It had started off okay, but dizziness, and the risk of falling, had gradually become a real problem for me. Even when I switched to giving blood monthly, the dizziness remained. But I also started experiencing heart irregularities and bad pains in my stomach. In the end, phlebotomy had to be replaced by iron chelation, which meant taking drugs that bind with excess iron in the blood. The chemicals in the drug make the iron less harmful, and so easier to eliminate from the body. But this is another unnatural process, and over time it produced new, unwelcome side effects including vomiting, diarrhea and nasty skin rashes. I became very worried about how all this was going to end. My doctor was very supportive, but he'd seen this all before. Treatments start out okay, but they don't always stay that way. In truth, the standard treatments for HCT were not nice even when they work. But for me they were no longer even working, while the side effects were becoming increasingly nastier. And I faced a lifetime of this. I was feeling increasingly stuck. And the more I worried, the more willing I was to look elsewhere for help. And that's exactly how I found myself listening to respected natural health practitioners like Shelley Manning. Which was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, to be honest. Choice made. So despite initial skepticism about the claims of ex-HCT sufferers, I decided to do what they did. I got a copy of the same program and I followed it to the letter. And it worked. A series of hospital tests confirmed that my HCT gene no longer expresses in the way it did. Meaning it's impossible for HCT to exist any longer in my body. My iron readings have been in the safe range for just over 3 years now. I'm not expecting they'll ever be a problem for me ever again. I can't tell you how happy, how relieved I was when I got the all clear. I honestly nearly cried. Let me tell you how it all worked for me. HCT treated in 2 steps. If you're interested, please click on the link below the video to watch the full content.